Hello everyone, welcome to another interesting and informative session of the Analyst brought to you by Vajiram and Ravi. In today's session, we will discuss 7 important articles as featured in the Hindu and Indian Express for your comprehensive understanding of the current affairs explained to you in the easiest language possible. The topics are as follows. From your analysis section, in the first topic, we'll try to analyze the persisting challenges with India's public distribution system and also look at certain suggestive measures which has been provided by the today's editorial. Then in the second topic, we'll try to ponder upon a question that why despite repetitive efforts, India has been unable to increase its wind energy capacity and what are the steps which shall be taken. Then from your simplified section, we will take up 5 news. We will try to simplify the news for you and also provide certain important value additions and practice questions keeping in mind the approaching prelims 2025. So stay tuned. The editorial today highlights the issue of leakages which are taking place in the public distribution system and suggests for certain reforms which shall be incorporated in this PDS. The PDS which forms an important component of your GS3 paper under the larger theme of buffer stock and food security. So let's first try to understand that what does this PDS actually entails. The PDS, which is one of the most important social security schemes in the country, following the directive principle of Article 47, which basically directs the central government to improve the nutritional status of the people, to raise the public health or improve the public health. Following which the PDS was actually created under the Ministry of Consumer Affairs, where it actually aims to achieve the objective of the aims and objectives of National Food Security Act 2013, which basically provided a kind of a statutory backing to the targeted PDS system which was created in the year of 1997. Thus basically recognizing the right to food as your legal right. Also keep in mind that one of the judgments back in 2022, the Supreme Court also held that the right to food also forms an integral part of your right to dignified life. Now, what are actually the objectives of National Food Security Act 2013? So, it basically aims to provide subsidized food to 75% of the rural population and 50% of the urban population, thus providing subsidized food grain to almost 66% of the people in the country, which as per the recent estimate is around 91 crore people. And what is this subsidized rate which we are discussing about? So this is basically the rate, a kind of a very minimal rate on which the certain staple foods such as for example wheat and rice are provided. For example, wheat is provided at 2 rupees per kg and rice is provided at 3 rupees per kg. And who are the beneficiaries who are actually going to get this subsidized food? So let's say for example there are priority households. The priority households are basically those people who have a meager income of less than 1 lakh rupees per annum. So they are put in the priority household category. Then there are certain people who fall in the below poverty line as per the Tendulkar committee or as per the estimation of socio-economic caste census of 2011. Then there are certain people such as for example the people who are poorest among these poor, and for them the Annadata Aay Yojana was actually launched back in 2000 to target such 1 crore poorest of the poor people. When we have understood the aims and objective of PDS, let's try to understand the functioning of this public distribution system, which is actually very important step to understand the issues which exist in PDS. So basically, both central and state government under the National Food Security Act of 2013 has some shared responsibilities. For example, under the NFSA 2013, the central government is responsible for the procurement of the food grains, which will be ultimately be provided to the beneficiary. And this procurement of food grain, the central government does at what? At the minimum support price. Then the food which has been procured, it is stored by the Food Corporation of India. The Food Corporation of India, which is basically a statutory body created in the year of 1965 under the Act of Food Corporation Act 1964, which was actually followed by the creation of Committee for Agriculture Cost and Prices CSCP, which actually decides the rate for MSP. Also, the Food Corporation of India is responsible for transportation and the bulk allocation of this collected food grain, which is then transferred to the state government, and the state government purchases this food grain from the central government at a price called as Central Issue Price or CIP. Keep this in mind. So the CIP is basically this price which you guys can see here, which is being actually transferred to the beneficiaries. Then the state government has certain other responsibilities, such as for example identification of the eligible families. the beneficiaries, then issue the ration cards to them, and then supervise the fair price shops which are created at the localities from where this subsidized food is actually transferred to the beneficiary, a common person like you and me. We have understood the functioning now. Now let's try to understand what are the issues which are revolving around the public distribution system. Because if we look at the Global Hunger Index, which was released very recently, India has ranked at an abysmal ranking of 105th among 127 countries, with a report highlighting that there exists a serious level of hunger which is prevalent in our country. So obviously, the kind of a subsidized food system which we have created to ensure the national food security, that is not functioning at its optimum. And that is exactly what has been highlighted by the today's editorial as well, where it states that if we look at the household consumption expenditure survey data 23-24, which was actually released by NSSO very recently, we look at the kind of monthly per capita expenditure which people are doing in the area of rural and urban areas, we will actually realize that a high percentage of this monthly per capita expenditure is actually going towards food. For example, in rural area, 46% of the monthly per capita expenditure, and in urban areas, 39% of monthly per capita expenditure is actually directed towards food itself. Now imagine yourself as a person who falls in the category of below poverty line. Imagine yourself that you have a meager income of 10,000 rupees a month. Imagine that 46% of this income is actually going towards purchasing food itself, even though you are entitled to a subsidized food under the NFSA 2013. What you will do with the remaining 5,400 rupees? Spend them on education, buy other daily necessities item, or pay for your healthcare, etc. What is the amount you will actually be left with? So the idea is that obviously this scheme, which is actually the idea was to provide the people the kind of nutritional security so that they will actually spend on other necessities, that is not functioning out. And as per the editorial today, the major reason for that is the high amount of leakages which is taking place under the PDS, which basically means that the kind of entitlement which these people have from the poor category, they are not getting the food which they are entitled for. Let's look at the kind of extent of this leakage. So as per the findings, it actually reveals a significant discrepancy according to which 28% of the allocated grain, which amounts to 19.6 million metric tons of rice and wheat, has failed to reach the intended recipients. And that translates to what? That translates to loss of about only 69,108 crore to the public exchequer. Thus, the editorial highlights that this is one of the biggest annual schemes which is swept under the carpet in the name of helping the poor. Now, if you look at this high amount of leakage among the states, Arunachal Pradesh has around 63% of the total leakage. Nagaland 60% leakage takes place. In Gujarat 43%. In Himachal Pradesh 36%. In Uttarakhand 35%. The national average itself is 28%. So out of 100 kg which shall be given to these poor people, 28 kg does not even reach to them. Now, to decode that what are the causes of such leakage, we will refer to the PRS Legislative Report 2024. A research which actually kind of classifies this leakage into three types. The first is the pilferage or the damage which takes place in the storage or transportation. The second is the inclusion, and the third is the exclusion error. So let's try to understand them one by one. The first is the pilferage or the damage. If we look at the CAG report of 2020-2021, it says that the FCI has inadequate storage capacity. For that purpose, just look at the data here as provided to us by the Food Corporation of India, FCI. So it states that the food grain production in million tons has almost consistently increased from 2018 to 2023 to 24. So the food grain production is increasing. In comparison to that, the kind of storage capacity with FCI and state agencies which it has been actually on decline. So we are unable to match with the increasing food production. That is the first reason. And this problem is further augmented by the kind of open-ended procurement policy which FCI adopts or the government adopts. What is this open-ended procurement policy? The idea is that the procurement which is being done by the FCI to provide the food to these beneficiaries, to this poor strata of the society, it is not demand-based, rather it is actually supply-based. So let's say, for example, there are people who are demanding 100 kg of rice, but the government ends up procuring around 120 kg. Why this excessor takes place? The reason for that is that government, even though there is not a statutory recognition, but the government tells the farmer that if the prices of the crop is actually going to decline up to a certain level, we will rope in and we will procure your crop at MSP, at minimum support price. So obviously there is much more procurement under this open-ended procurement policy. Then if we have already procured it, it's not like we have got the good cold storage infrastructure or the kind of nearby food processing units for that. So what happens? We have actually poor storage infrastructure. Even in 2024, more than 60%, as per the FCI data itself, more than 60% of the godowns, they actually use cover and plinth kind of storage system, where this food grain is just basically covered with tarpaulin, which obviously does not provide any kind of protection against, let's say, for example, moisture, heat stress, or any kind of bacterial infection, etc. Then there takes place the constraint in liquidation because of the FIFO principle, which basically exists for first in, first out principle. What does this mean? First in, first out principle basically leads to the non-liquidation of the old stocks. So for example, let's say one particular state agency or the one particular godown already had a 500 kg of rice which was designated to a particular area. But now the government actually procured 500 kg of more rice in the Kharif season to actually placate the farmers who were protesting. So government said, okay, we'll buy your 500 kg rice at MSP. Now when this 500 kg is transferred to this godown, this new batch is actually dispatched earlier than the old batch. And the old batch is kept idle in the godown itself. It feels as lonely as one UPSC aspirant. So that is a major issue. All of this actually leads to pilferage or damage. Then there are certain inclusion errors. The inclusion errors basically means that there are certain people who are not entitled or not eligible to actually get the benefits, but the diversion to non-beneficiaries actually gets through the ghost cards. Just look at the amount of the ration cards which were weeded out by several states. For example, in UP 72 lakhs, in Maharashtra 19 lakhs, or for example in Karnataka 12 lakhs. What does this data actually tells us is that this many number of illegal beneficiaries existed among these states. So basically what is happening that, let's say I am as a person, as a beneficiary, I am creating various kind of ghost cards. On the basis of that, I am accumulating a large number of rice. Either what I will do, I will sell this rice illegally in the commercial market, or that can actually lead to the hoarding or black marketing practices, ultimately leading to inflation in the market. Now, why this issue actually takes place? Because if you guys remember that the responsibility to identify the beneficiaries was given to the state government. The state government passed this burden of basket to the local authorities. In the local authorities, there is ultimately the corruption which creeps in. So you guys can quote this in your ethics answer as well. Now, because of that corruption, there was an issue of this large amount of ghost cards which had started penetrating. Correct? The next is the issue of exclusion errors. So this started taking place because of the automation of FPS. Right? So now let's try to understand this. What happened that in the year of 2017, the Ministry of Consumer Affairs and Food, it actually brought a kind of a directive or a recommendation to the FPS that from now onwards, you will identify the beneficiaries through Aadhaar and the biometric authentication, ultimately leading to the kind of automation of FPS. Now, when this automation of FPS was done, the idea was that till now, there is non-linkage of Aadhaar with ration card. So let's say, for example, I have a ration card, I have Aadhaar card, but I have not linked them, right? Will that lead to the cancellation of my services under the PDS? Absolutely not, because it is still not a ground. So obviously that is one of the inclusion error. Then what has happened that, let's say I have got my Aadhaar card, my biometric, etc. But that is not being identified by the machines because of the poor infrastructure. Or for example, I do not have adequate amount of data, documents, etc. to actually prove that I am a beneficiary. That is also a major problem, and that leads to the kind of exclusion errors. For example, if you look at the report which was submitted by UIDAI to the Supreme Court back in 2022, it is stated that such exclusion errors because of Aadhaar authentication stands at 8.5% and retina and fingerprint exclusion stands at around 6%. So that has led to look at the number of the people who were actually left out of the PDS, 2.8 crore in UP itself, 10.8 crore approximately across the country. So there are inclusion and exclusion errors. Then there exist two other major problems. One which was identified by the Shanta Kumar committee, which was created in 2015 to actually restructure the Food Corporation of India, where it is stated that the coverage of NFSA is really high, but the food allocation to the priority household is low. Because if we refer to the data published by NSSO 2023-24, it tells us that the per capita consumption of cereal in rural areas is around 9.6 kg per person per month. In urban areas, it is around 8.1 kg. But how much these people are actually getting under the NFSA? That was around what? 4 kg per member or 25 kg per card only. So obviously they will end up buying the food from outside. That will be a problem. That will ultimately lead to the kind of out-of-pocket expenditure for them, which was reflected in the MPC as well. Then there obviously exists the issue of increasing burden of subsidy, right? For example, the subsidy which was given for this purpose in the year of 2024, as per the budget 2024 data, it was only 2,250 crore rupees. The major reason for that is that when the government procures this food grain, the government procures at MSP. When the government is selling that to the state government, the government is selling that at what? CIP, Central Issue Price. This Central Issue Price has not increased since the year of 2002, but the MSP has kept on increasing. So obviously the cost to the public exchequer or for the central government has kept on increasing over the years. And that, according to the Economic Survey 2020, has become now unmanageably large, right? So these are the major issues for which the government has actually taken certain steps, such as, for example, digitization of ration cards and beneficiaries. Aadhaar seeding with the ration cards has been done. Online allocation for the food grain for all fair price shops has been done. The government has tried to streamline the supply chain management, grievance redressal system. Just look at the data which has been provided here as well. The automation of fair price shops, which currently stands at around 99% of the total FPS. So these are the steps which the government has taken, but what can be our way forward? So if we refer to the Vadhva committee, it is stated, also following the directive of Shanta Kumar panel, that there shall be overall reduction of the coverage of NFSA to the 40% of the people, and these 40% of the people shall be identified first through a particular criteria, the 40% poorest of the population, and we shall target that. Then, just like the targeted PDS which existed, we need to raise the supply now to at least 7 kg per person. Then the FCI shall actually deviate its functioning from the major 5 states like the green belt states and move towards focusing on South and Northeast India. Also, we should exclude the beneficiaries which are already getting some kind of cash transfers under other schemes like, let's say, PM Kisan Samman Nidhi. Now, as per the editorial, the free food to 57% of the population obviously needs revisiting, and those who are above the Antyodaya or extremely poor, they shall pay at least half of the MSP. These savings can then be plowed back into the agriculture, improve the agriculture status. To plug the leakage, direct cash transfer to the beneficiary shall be done, and then leave on them which kind of nutrient supply they want to achieve. Then there shall be digital coupons for more nutritious food through the nutrition hub of FPS, and that shall be encouraged as well. So note down these suggestions, try to attempt this particular question, and we move forward to the next news, where the article throws light on the persisting challenges for increasing the wind energy installations in India by citing the case study for the projects in Tamil Nadu. The wind energy, which forms an important component of your GS3 paper under the larger theme of renewable energy sector. Why such impetus on renewable energy sector is actually important? Because if you guys can recall, right now the COP29 which was taking place, that is going to culminate today. In COP26 of UNFCCC, that is the Glasgow commitments which we did, right? So we actually launched a Panch Amrit target where we said that we are going to generate non-fossil electricity capacity of 500 gigawatt by 2030. We will have 50% of our electricity capacity which will be coming from renewable energy sources itself by 2030. We are going to actually reduce our carbon emission by 1 billion tons. Then 45% reduction in carbon emission intensity of the GDP will take place by 2030, and we are going to achieve a net zero status by the year of 2070 itself. So on the basis of that, let's try to understand the scenario of renewable energy which currently stands for our country as per the International Renewable Energy Agency report of September 2024, which actually states that currently India is the third largest energy consuming country with the installed capacity which is around 4th globally. Which country has the highest? China. The task for the day is just name the second and the third country with the highest installed capacity of renewable energy. And this renewable energy actually currently forms the 42.26% of the total installed capacity of the power which we have. When we talk specifically in the terms of wind power capacity, we rank at 4th. In solar power capacity, we are currently ranking at 5th. Now let's try to understand the wind energy capacity and the potential in our country as per the National Institute of Wind Energy. According to which, if we look at the wind turbine towers, so if this wind turbine tower is at the height of 150 meter, we currently have the wind energy potential of 1163 gigawatt. And if it is at 120 meter, the 120 meter which is the normal height of the wind turbines right now, that is around 695 gigawatt. At 150 meter, the state with the highest capacity is Rajasthan. At 120 meter, currently it is Gujarat. So the percentage of this wind potential which we are able to use very proudly, only 6.5%. And the highest installed capacity of this wind sector, the total installed capacity which we have, 25% of that is in Gujarat and 15% of that is currently in Tamil Nadu. This wind power, what is the share of that in the total renewable energy capacity which we have? That is around 201.45 gigawatt. So 90 gigawatt comes from solar power, 47 comes from wind, large hydro makes 46 gigawatt, biomass gives us 10.7, small hydropower gives us 5 gigawatt, and waste to energy is only limited to 0.6 gigawatt. So obviously the kind of schemes like Gobardhan which we are launching, it is not actually showing the results at the grassroots level. Now let's try to understand our wind energy potential when it comes to onshore as well as offshore wind energy projects, right? So onshore basically means those projects which are being created just right next to your house. What are the pros of these kind of projects? First of all, they're very cost effective. So we don't have to go into the sea, create a kind of a structure there, kind of the basements there, kind of extensive research which is required there. All that is not required. So obviously it is much more cost effective, quicker and cheaper installations can take place. Obviously the creation of such wind energy will boost the local economy of the region. Now there exists lower transmission loss. Why? Because the power grids and the customers are very easily connected on the ground level. And it will also reduce the wear and tear which we actually associates more with the offshore wind energy projects. But there are certain cons which exist, such as for example the large scale area which is required, which we'll be seeing just further in the session, because of the high population density which we have in our country, being the most populous country in the world as per the United Nations World Population Prospect. Also, there is reduced wind energy potential. Why? Because of the intermittent supply. So at offshore, you are actually facing the sea winds. You are actually facing the seasonal winds. So obviously there is a kind of a consistent supply that you cannot ensure in the kind of hinterland areas. Also, it can lead to noise and environment pollution which can actually impact the locality, and they will obviously be against installation of such projects in the vicinity of their habitation. Then there are certain pros which exist with the offshore wind energy projects, and what are they? The larger turbines, more energy potential. Stronger sea winds leads to consistent supply of wind. Less intrusive environment impacts can take place. Obviously it will not impact the large scale human habitation, and land acquisition is very easy there. The right to property under Article 300A, someone is at least not claiming that in the sea. Then there are certain cons, and the cons are obviously the high maintenance cost because of the consistent wear and tear which takes place because of the waves and the transmission and the distribution losses. The idea is that what are the issues along with these cons which we have discussed, they are also form the part of the issues, but what are the major issues when it comes to the wind energy generation in our country? So despite various wind industry which are flagging the land acquisition issue, the Ministry of New Renewable Energy, it is completely confident that we will achieve the target of 500 gigawatt which we have set under the Panchamrit by the year of 2030. But there are certain impediments to that. First is the land acquisition and the transmission infrastructure issues which exist. So for example, to actually install these wind projects, you need an extensive research. So there is a very long gestation period, there is a high capital cost. Then obviously there are a lot of issues which arises with the land acquisition. Let's refer to the today's article. See what data it provides to us. It tells us that for a 2 megawatt wind turbine, usually which is 120 meter high, you require 3.5 acre of land, right? Then for a 2.5 megawatt turbine, you will actually require 5 acre of area. So now we will look to the specific case study of a place called as Vajiram in Tamil Nadu, which has a high potential wind site, around 48 megawatt installed capacity by now, and it is made up of mostly 250 kilowatt turbines, very minuscule level, and the potential of the site is of around 100 megawatt. The project here was actually launched at 800 crore and was sanctioned 6 years ago, but it has yet to take off because of these multiple land acquisition issues which exist. Now if you look in Tamil Nadu, the windmills installed after 2018, they do not have any kind of banking facility. Why? Because when a turbine is repowered, it will be treated as a new installation, and the generator cannot bank the energy which is being generated, the long gestation period which exists. This impacts the kind of a financial viability of the project as well. Then there exists a kind of a high maintenance cost. Why? First of all, you will require each and every product. If you are not kind of producing them locally, you will need to import them. Or for example, you need a high skilled labor actually. The kind of installation vessels which you require for offshore projects, all of that lead to high maintenance cost. Then there exists a kind of inconsistent government policies, because first of all, we were putting a lot of our impetus on the solar energy. So we actually caught a bit off guard when it came to the wind power. Then what happened that earlier the government was actually following a kind of a feed-in tariff policy, where the government was saying that to any new player, if you are going to install, let's say, a wind energy project, then the government is going to procure energy from you at higher than the market price. But now the government has actually bought competitive bidding here as well. So obviously this is kind of unfavorable for the small player. Then there exists the kind of inefficiency of turbines, because let's say for the today's editorial itself, the article, it actually tells us that let's say if there is a turbine and that turbine is around 15 years old and it has power generation capacity of less than 2 megawatt. So what we can do, we can actually replace it now, right? Obviously its wind energy capacity potential has actually been reduced. We can replace it. This is the process which we called as repowering. And such repowering potential currently for our country is 25 gigawatt, which is not being utilized. Then if you look at the kind of a report which was actually published by a researcher in the Energy Transition Summit which took place in 2023, it stated, also published in the Hindu, that the impact of global warming is actually slowing down the monsoonal winds which comes. And because of the reduced speed of wind, obviously the kind of generation capacity which we have on our west coast, that is going to compromise as well. Also, there will have a significant impact on the biodiversity. For example, in the region of Texas in USA, where the wind farms has been created, this wind generation energy farms, there has been actually kind of observance of 77% reduction of the population of red-head ducks. Why to go that far to USA? We can take the example in our country itself of Great Indian Bustard. Their collision with the power transmission lines in the state of Rajasthan and Gujarat, ultimately leading to their decline, rampant decline in the population. You guys might be reading that in the newspaper. So what the government has done so far, first of all, the government has bought a viability gap funding scheme for the offshore wind energy projects. Then the government has actually bought a policy for repowering of wind power projects 2016, under which the government said that now will provide further 0.25% tax rebatement, and that will be provided by the Indian Renewable Energy Development Authority, IREDA. If one of you are investing in the stock market, you guys can hear my pain in the voice when I'm saying IREDA. Then the government actually kind of created a hybrid policy for National Wind Solar Hybrid Policy 2018, under which the government is also trying to create a green energy corridor project, and 100% FDI is allowed through the automatic route. The next question we shall ask ourselves is that what can be the way forward? So the article suggests that first of all, the repowering potential which we have, which we're discussing of the 25 gigawatt, that shall be exploited specifically in the region of Tamil Nadu. Then there shall be repowering of the small turbines which can be done to, the contribution of wind energy to the total energy consumed during the peak windy seasons can go easily up to 25%. Then we shall need to harness the wind energy potential by the generation, and we can also need to integrate the transmission lines of the various renewable energy kind of sectors which we have, and that will ultimately lead to the kind of a uniform renewable energy infrastructure in our country. So on the basis of this, just try to solve this particular question, attempt the answer writing, and we move forward to the next news, where we are going to take up a very interesting article. We will talk about the issue of fiscal federalism related to your GS2 paper under the larger theme of issues related to center and state relation. First of all, we'll try to understand the borrowing powers of the central and the state government, which is actually derived from the chapter 2 of the part 12 of the Constitution, where the article 292 specifically deals with the borrowing power of the central government, and it says that the central government can borrow the loans from within India as well as outside India on the guarantee of the Consolidated Fund of India. Then comes your article 293 that actually empowers the state government to borrow the loans upon guarantee of which the Consolidated Fund of India, but now that shall be done within the territory of India. Now some of you will be like that, sir, but very recently I read about some particular state, let's say, borrowing from World Bank. So what happens that, let's say for example, there is a new project, and let's say that project is hypothetically being launched in the state of UP. Now World Bank is interested to fund it. So UP will actually go and take the route through the central government. It will be the central government which will ultimately borrow the money from World Bank, transfer it to the government of UP, and the government of UP will have to return that amount to the central government. Now, in both of the cases, the extent of borrowing has to be fixed from time to time as law enacted by the Parliament and state legislature. As in Article 293 Clause 2, the government of India can grant loans to the state government in the condition laid down by the Parliament up to the limit which is fixed by the Article 292 itself. The central government can also provide the guarantees upon the Consolidated Fund of India in respect of the loans which has been raised by the state, as we were discussing in the case of World Bank. Now Article 293 Clause 3 states, it actually kind of imposes a restriction on the state government, where it says that, let's say if the state government had taken a loan from the central government and any amount is due, the interest, the major amount, the principal amount, then the consent of the central government will be required if there is any kind of outstanding, right? And the consent of central government is now essential to raise any further loan by the state government. Now remember that the rationale behind this Article 293 was actually derived from the Section 163 of the Government of India Act 1935, where a kind of a Constituent Assembly member whose name was A. Iyengar, he noted that the issue of borrowing and loans, it requires greater scrutiny because the borrowing imposes a kind of a obligation not only on the present generation but the future generation as well. So the Section 163 Clause 4 of the Government of India Act 1935 had provided that regarding the consent, that Federation shall not refuse or make unreasonable delay in granting the loan or providing guarantee or impose any unreasonable condition when the sufficient cause is shown by the provinces. And if any such dispute arises, then the matter will be referred to the Governor General, whose decision shall be final. When this matter was being discussed in the Constituent Assembly, A. Iyengar has put forward a kind of a commission, like a finance commission, which if the dispute will arise, then the finance commission can actually take the decision in the favor of any one of them. But this clause was not adopted in the Constitution. So now what has happened, that there has been a current ceiling which has been imposed on the government of Kerala, a net borrowing ceiling by the central government. This ceiling is currently, which is put upon the Kerala, is around 3% of their gross state domestic product, and this NBC, the net borrowing ceiling, actually encompasses all borrowing avenues, which includes the open market loans, financial institution loans, liabilities from the public account of state, all of that. And obviously that has acted as kind of a huge blow to the financial position of the Kerala, finding it difficult to meet its expenditure. why the central government has done that in the first place. The idea is to implement the mandate in the Article 292. The Fiscal Responsibility and Budget Management Act, FRBM Act 2003, was enacted to maintain the financial restraint by establishing goals such as, for example, the elimination of revenue shortfall and the reduction of fiscal deficit. Then the act was amended. So earlier the idea was that the government shall actually bring its fiscal deficit to 3% and the overall debt which it has to the economy will be around 40%. So 40% for the central government and 40% as the cumulative of all of the state. That shall be done. But then it was amended back in 2018, which actually required the central government to ensure the fiscal deficit does not surpass 3% of the GDP, which is currently around 5.1% as per the budget 2024, and the total public debt did not surpass 60% of the GDP. By 2024, the idea was that the government expects to reduce the fiscal deficit now to from this 5.1 to 4.5% of GDP. Remember, we were discussing that the same when it came to the issue of kind of subsidies which the government is providing to the PDS. So the fiscal consolidation is a kind of a major task for the government if it has set such an ambitious target. Now it is trying to curtail the borrowings of the states as well. But such curtailment actually kind of violates the fiscal autonomy of the states as highlighted by the today's editorial. It basically suggests that it actually violates the principle of fiscal federalism. Why? Because it encroaches the financial autonomy of the states. It actually lowers down their ability of budget balancing. So let's say for the example, the Kerala government was saying that, okay, I'm going to launch a new scheme to actually benefit the people who are poor and are not getting subsidized ration. But now it is unable to do that. So the whole budget balancing which it has done, it has said that, okay, I'm going to borrow for this particular scheme, but now it cannot borrow any further. So obviously that will hinder the socio-economic development and that will create a kind of a tussle because the Kerala government has approached the Supreme Court. So there is a larger issue of violation of federalism. The article suggests today that when exercising these wide powers guaranteed under the Article 293 Clause 4, the central government can take certain steps. First is to ensure transparency in the decision making, to ensure that the procedure and standard for accepting and rejecting the government borrowings are transparent in the public, the reasons are provided. Second is to have a consultative process where the state government shall actually brought in the consultation before prescribing any terms or limitations on borrowing. Third is to ensure equitable treatment where there an employment of borrowing terms and restrictions applied, and that shall be done uniformly across the states. Right? So there is a kind of an idea which is actually being implicit in the opposition states that it is only being done to the opposition states, not to the ruling party states. Right? Then last is the financial autonomy for a state, and that has to be ensured. So remember this idea whenever you guys are going to write the fiscal federalism, use a lot of these data, this debate, and we move forward to the next steps, where we are going to actually examine the causes of death which has taken place in the Bandhavgarh Tiger Reserve. The Bandhavgarh Tiger Reserve, which was very recently covered in the Analyst itself. Now the question here can be, just for a revision's sake, that how many tiger reserves exist in the country? Do not Google it, just comment your answers down. We are going to take up this particular debate under the GS3 paper, the conservation of flora and fauna. So what has led to the elephant deaths? Let's first try to understand that. The wild elephants which died in the Madhya Pradesh Bandhavgarh Tiger Reserve very recently after consuming a large quantity of kodo millet plants which had been infected with a fungus. As per the report released by the Indian Council of Agriculture Research, Indian Veterinary Research Institute, which is in Bareilly. Now, the traces of cyclopyrazonic acid has been found, which is a kind of a toxin produced by the fungi which is known to affect the kodo millet plants. Let's try to understand the kodo millet from the prelims perspective. So it is basically a grain which is native to India. Its scientific name is Paspalum scrobiculatum, right? I'm sorry for my pronunciation. It is cultivated in which particular region? In tropical and subtropical. So basically just take the belt from Chhattisgarh, Madhya Pradesh, comes to Gujarat, Karnataka, and then Tamil Nadu. So basically if we look at international level, it is found in Pakistan, Philippines, Indonesia, Vietnam, Thailand, and West Africa. So it grows very well in the region of poor soil, in arid and semi-arid region. Remember, kodo millet is a drought tolerant and high yield kind of crop which is very rich in vitamin minerals, and it is also gluten free, easy to digest, and rich source of antioxidant. Now why there has been actually death which has been incurred to these poor elephants? The idea is the kodo poisoning. So let's say there is this kodo millet plant here which you guys can see, and in the rainy season what happens that the leaves of these kodo plants and the grass around it starts developing a parasitic fungal endophyte which is called as ergot. This ergot is basically kind of releases a cyclopiazonic acid which is basically produced by these fungi and the molds like ergot. So when elephant they consumed this ergot affected plant, this parasitic fungal endophyte which was producing this cyclopiazonic acid, it led to what? The nervous and cardiovascular failures as well as liver dysfunctions among these elephants. And what are the lessons which we can draw from this Bandhavgarh kodo millet elephant poisoning incident? That the measures like just banning a crop only amplify the trouble and animosity. Efficient harvest storage management is actually the key. Right. Next is for the prelims perspective, we are going to look at the kind of some important data related to elephants. First is that they are keystone species. So obviously their presence in the forest impacts a lot of other flora and fauna, and thus their preservation can lead to the preservation of larger habitual area. The idea is that India has the largest number of Asian elephants, and as per the 2017 census, India currently has the population of around 29,964. The states with the highest population is Karnataka, followed by Assam, and then there is Kerala. Even then, in IUCN, the elephant is registered as an endangered species and provided the highest level of protection of Schedule 1 under the Wildlife Protection Act 2023. And for the protection of these elephants, there were Project Elephant which was launched in 1992 and the kind of preservation of the illegal killing of elephant program which was launched in 1997. Now remember that these elephants, they travel in herds, right? They live in a kind of a family. You guys might be seeing a lot of cute videos on YouTube. The idea is who is the leader of this herd? The oldest female. The average lifespan of these elephants are around 70 years and the maximum gestation period is around 22 months. And what we are going to do now is that we are also going to look at a news which appeared today, which also provided us certain recent steps which has been taken by the government of India for the animal conservation, which we can relate with this elephant death which has occurred. What is that conservation effort? The conservation effort is a kind of a pandemic fund which was very recently launched by the Ministry of Fisheries Animal Husbandry, a project titled Animal Health Security Strengthening in India and Pandemic Preparedness and the Response. So this kind of response also include these kind of zoonotic diseases, right? The one which we are discussing about, that is kodo plant. The idea is, what is this project? So the project aims to enhance the country's capacity to actually prevent, detect and respond to the animal health threat. And this pandemic fund was created where, note this down for prelims, created by the G20 countries in 2022 during the Indonesia's presidency, not in India, in response to the COVID-19 pandemic. And this project will be executed with the help of 3 implementing agencies, which are Asian Development Bank, World Bank and the Food Agriculture Organization, and it is expected to be completed by the year of 2026. What are the expected outcomes of this project according to the ministry? The outcomes can be augmentation of laboratory system and vaccine manufacturing facilities, strengthening of surveillance and early warning systems, development of human resource capacity and competency, and strengthening of data system, analytics and risk communication. Also to address the cross-cutting institutional capacity gaps at national and regional levels. So this is for prelims and this is particularly for your mains. So just try to note these informations and we move forward to the next news, where we are going to talk about a very important geophysical phenomena, and that is the idea of lightning. What is lightning? Lightning is basically the discharge of electrons which take place either between the clouds or between the cloud and the earth. Let's first try to understand what is the science behind the lightning. So the idea is that because of the consistent insolation or high temperature in the particular area, or more scientifically because of the kind of collision of photon particles, these hitting of photons, this surface heating starts taking place. And because of this surface heating or the increasing temperature, the air molecules, they start loosening up and they start spreading, and thus they ultimately rise. So when they rise above and above in the troposphere, there takes place something called as lapse rate. What is lapse rate? So with the increasing height, the temperature actually decreases and the lapse rate is around 6.5 degrees Celsius per kilometer. So that means that with every kilometer rise, the temperature will decline by 6.5 degrees Celsius. So now this warm air which is rising, it will start getting what? It will start getting cooled down, or condensation will take place. So when the warming was taking place, it was actually spreading. Now the condensation is taking place, so now they are doing what? Contracting. So the air molecules, when they are contracting, they will collide with each other, and that will further release what? The latent heat of vaporization. So because of that, they will again get warm up and they will rise further and further in the air, in the troposphere. And they will reach to a particular level where the temperature is either 0 degrees Celsius or below than that. And because of that, they will now, this water vapor, they will start converting into what? Small ice crystals. So now let's say that this is an ice crystal. They are contracting, latent heat of vaporization. The ice crystal is further rising. But as it is rising further and further, it is getting more and more condensed, and thus it is getting heavier. So the idea is that it will reach to a point where it cannot rise further because it has become so much heavy, and it will start falling down. So let's say this particular ice crystal A is falling down, and then there is an ice crystal B which is still rising, going up above in the air. Both of them will collide, and that is exactly what creates a collision layer. The falling heavier ice crystals and the rising lighter ice crystals. So basically in this cloud system, over a period of time, there is a collision layer, and above and below that there is a kind of a positive and negative charge electrons are created because of this collision which are taking place. So this lower level of cloud has become negatively charged. It has got so much of electron. Now when we talk about Earth is generally electrically neutral. It's not like a good supplier or conductor of electricity. But in comparison to the cloud, which has now become very heavily electrically charged, now it has become what? It has less number of electrons. So obviously there will be a kind of a current flow now which will take place, right, from the higher amount of electrons to the lower amount of electrons. But this air which exists between these cloud and Earth, the air is a poor conductor. So when the electricity is discharged from the cloud towards the low energy area, the idea is that it will always search for a shortest distance, and this is where the article today talks about the lightning rods concept. So the climate change is doing what? It is making actually these lightning strikes around the world much more common and deadlier. For example, every year around 24,000 people around the world are being killed by such strikes, and in India itself, lightning strike killed around 2,887 people in the year of 2022. There has been also been kind of a rising demands to actually declare this phenomena now as a natural disaster in our country. Thus, now let's try to understand that how we can actually install these lightning rods over the buildings and to prevent ourselves from the strike of the lightning, and how these lightning rods actually functions. So the idea is that when this lightning is occurring, it will follow which path? The path of the least resistance, which basically means that it will move towards the closest object with the highest electric potential. The reason lightning strikes the rod has to do with its shape. So these lightning rods are pointy, and the pointed things, they create stronger electric fields near them. It's like saying that the flow of water speeds up where there is a near a nozzle. So the electric field is the force that acts on a molecule of air. So it becomes what? It becomes the strongest near the lightning rod, and this force basically ionizes the air near the rod first and provides a route for the current to flow. So this is exactly how the lightning rod functions. Remember the concept of lightning. Remember how the lightning rod functions. Remember these information for your prelims examination, and we move forward to the next news, where we are going to talk about a very important international institution which has featured today in the newspaper, and that is Interpol. Interpol is basically a kind of an agency which was created to create a kind of a collaboration between the various investigation agencies which exist around the world to actually pass the information about various kinds of criminals and terrorists. This Interpol actually stands for International Criminal Police Organization, created back in the year in 1923, coming from the impact of World War I. And India joined Interpol in which particular year? In the year of 1956. Currently, Interpol has 196 members, and its headquarters is where? In Lyon, France. It is basically governed by a governing body which is called as General Assembly. The General Assembly, which actually has a kind of an annual meeting where they take place. Keep this in mind that in the year of 2022, which country hosted this General Assembly of Interpol? That was our country. Now this General Assembly is actually headed by a president who has a tenure of 4 years. Now each and every country, there is a particular designated agency which actually coordinates with Interpol, and in our country that agency is Central Bureau of Investigation, CBI. Now when these agencies has to, let's say, extract information about a particular criminal or a terrorist, how these agencies coordinate or share the information? They share the information through a common platform called as I-24/7 platform. Now in the news today, it has told us that Bangladesh is going actually to seek Interpol help to repatriate Sheikh Hasina, and the red notice will be issued soon. So what is this red notice? Let's first try to understand that. What are the various color-coded Interpol notices and what they signify? So red notice basically stands for tracing the miscreants against whom a charge sheet has been filed in the court of a country. Blue notice exists which actually help the countries to share alert on suspects and response to requests or information about the wanted person. Yellow notice is to actually locate missing persons, minors in particular. Orange stands to warn against any imminent threat from a person, object or material. Green actually exists to alert foreign countries about the repeated offenders which involve sex-related crimes and cyber crimes, so that will be green. Purple is to track, arrest and deport members of international crime syndicates and drug smuggling. Black is to identify any unidentified dead bodies which are believed to be of a foreign national. So just take out one keywords, remember each one of them, remember red and blue very much in particular, and we move to the next news. Where as the Justice Sanjeev Khanna is going to be sworn in as the 51st Chief Justice of India today, we are going to look at the appointment of Chief Justice of India under the theme of judiciary from your GS2 paper. Does our constitution say anything about the appointment of Chief Justice of India? The answer is no, because it does not mention any procedure for appointment of CJI. The articles which deals with the appointment of judges are, first is your Article 124 Clause 1, which says that there will be a Supreme Court of India consisting of Chief Justice of India. First time there was a kind of a Supreme Court of Calcutta which was created under the Regulating Act of 1773 with Elijah MT as the Chief Justice. So the Article 124 says that there will be a Supreme Court and there will be a Chief Justice of India. The Article 124 Clause 2 says that every judge of the Supreme Court, including the Chief Justice of India, shall be appointed by the President of India. So from 1950 to 1973, there was a kind of a set convention where the senior member or the senior most judge of the Supreme Court was appointed as the CJI. This convention has been broken 2 times. First was both in the times of the Indira Gandhi government. First was in 1973 when A.N. Ray was actually appointed CJI, superseding 3 senior most judges. Then M.U. Beg was appointed in 1977, preceding the kind of the senior most judge of that time. Thus, the Supreme Court in the second judge case 1993 stated that only senior most judge of Supreme Court can now become a CJI, and this seniority is actually decided not on the basis of age rather than the number of years as a judge in the Supreme Court. And what is a qualification which is actually required to become a Supreme Court judge? First of all, you shall be a citizen of India. Then you shall be a judge of High Court for at least 5 years or an advocate of High Court for 10 years. And then you shall be a distinguished jurist in the opinion of the President. My question to all of you is that can a distinguished jurist or distinguished advocate, let's say, can become a judge of High Court or not? Is the same provision exist for a High Court or not? With this interesting question, we have actually reached to the end of our discussion today. Also, do not forget to attempt the questions at the end of the video and test your knowledge. We will meet in a very interesting discussion very soon. Till then, all the very best for your preparation and thank you.